It has been a few weeks now that the Pakistani American scholar Dr. Yasir Qadhi made some controversial remarks about the science of Hadith. Let's have a listen before I respond to those remarks.
Like, as you're aware, and you're an academic channel, right? You're well aware, nobody in the academy affirms the Muslim Sunni science of Hadith. Nobody. It is considered to be completely discredited.
Now, he's made a couple of clarification videos since then. However, the essence of his argument stands as he has stood by them even in those clarification videos. And that essence is that the science of Hadith does not meet the contemporary standards established in academia for valid history. That Hadith is essentially unacademic. And he cites the historical critical method, HCM, as the standard against which every historical narration has to be judged to be considered valid history academically. Now, in this brief video, I won't be explaining and defending the Hadith science, as that shall come later, nor shall I be bashing Dr. Qadhi, which many people have chosen to do. I would instead like to do two things: steelman Dr. Qadhi's position to better demonstrate where he's coming from, and secondly, to lay out the broad contours for how these concerns can be addressed. Historical criticism or historical critical method referred to here by Dr. Qadhi has indeed of late been presented as a standard against which all historical narrations are usually judged to determine their authenticity and interpretation in contemporary academic circles. What is historical criticism or historical critical method, you ask? For that, you can Google it, or you can read the article on Wikipedia and find out how it is defined, the tools it uses, and the criticism it has faced over the years. I am not going to get into that right now, maybe in some future video, so have at it on your own. Just know that it employs rational criteria unburdened by religious claims to ascertain the authenticity and interpretation of historical texts. But what I do want to do here is just highlight some of the outcomes that this method has produced when it comes to religious texts. By using HCM and other similar methods, the historical critics have reached at conclusions like Abraham was legendary and not a real person, that Moses was most likely also a legendary person, not a real person, that the Jews never had an exodus from Egypt, or even if they did have, it was certainly in no way near the scale that the Bible claims. This was just to highlight the futility of getting into HCM to prove authenticity of Islamic sources. If the most famous patriarchs from the Bible and Quran couldn't stand the test, there is little utility in putting the Quran and Hadith through the test. Notwithstanding, I am a firm believer that we Muslims should put our sources through the test. My claim is that they'll still fare leaps and bounds better than Jewish and Christian sources, if not substantially authentic altogether. Now, this is not a condemnation or marginalization of HCM, mind you. I believe HCM has set up quite rational standards to ascertain authenticity of historical narrations and documents, but it is far from being an exact science. Moreover, unless where it meets with natural sciences like carbon dating, etc., it is better categorized as a social science than physical science. So there's a lot of room for maneuver even after its well-considered verdicts. If treated with this kind of uncertainty, there's no harm in presenting Hadith for an HCM verdict, and Muslims should readily do so. But this then brings me to Dr. Qadhi's claim that Hadith does not fulfill the HCM criteria for valid history. Now, it is hard to imagine what is going on in Dr. Qadhi's mind, and I tend not to speculate such things, so I'm merely going to stick to the example that he gave. So, to prove his point, he gave the example of a famous assumption in Hadith science that goes by the principle as-sahabatu kulluhum adul, meaning all the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, shall be assumed to be truthful and trustworthy for purposes of hadith transmission, contrasting them from all other narrators in any chain of narration, with all others being subject to rigorous suspicion and tests of truthfulness for reliability. His contention is that this assumption about the companions is purely faith-based and not empirical. That's the only example he gave to substantiate his claim that I was able to find. So let me just briefly comment on it to make my point without making it too technical for this layman video. No, sir, this assumption is not faith-based. It is downright rational, not empirical, but rational and logical, much like many HCM criteria are rational and not empirical. The fact that this rational assumption is also endorsed by faith is a supporting evidence, not the primary evidence. Moreover, all foundational claims of Islam are substantiated only through consensus and transmission by multitudes, not by singular narrations. Furthermore, after metadata confirmation, which Dr. Qadhi is talking about here, each hadith has to go through multiple levels of jurisprudence to aid in drawing a verdict. All in all, the hadith science has always been self-critical. I don't want to get into any more specifics here, which will be best left for another video. I just want to highlight that the example given by Dr. Qadhi hardly substantiates his claim. Maybe if he can come up with some other example, it might help us in understanding what he's getting at. Having said that, no science drawn up in yesteryears is immaculate and without room for improvement, and that is why I want scholars and students alike doing their PhDs to focus on this topic. The least benefit we as Muslims will accrue from it is corrections and adjustments in some categorizations of the hadith. And the most benefit would be to offer corrections in the HCM model as a result of the comparison. So let's not shy away from it. And let's not be afraid of Jewish or Christian apologists mocking our religious sources. It is pure projection. Whatever our sources are found lacking of, if at all, will apply tenfold to their ones. Haven't we gone down this road many times before? Be that as it may, I'd also like to propose actual experiments to establish standards for ascertaining authenticity of oral traditions, which essentially hadiths are. In those experiments, a person can be chosen to play the role of a prophet, and then certain other people can be chosen to play the role of companions, then their progeny, and then their progeny. And we can then see how a narration maintains or does not maintain fidelity from utterance to end, stretched over a period of time. We should take these opportunities to improve upon our concepts, people, not kill the messenger, and Dr. Qadhi is a respectable scholar. We await other more appropriate examples from his side to substantiate his claim.